And that, I believe, was your dissent in the case.
Yes, and I was referring to some kinds of semi-automatic rifles that are banned by D.C. are widely owned in the United States. And that seemed to be the test that the Supreme Court had set forth in the Heller and McDonald cases. In other words, if a type of firearm is widely owned in the United States. Now, whether I agree with that test or not was not the issue before me. I have to follow the precedent of the Supreme Court as it's written. And that's what I tried to do in that case. It's a very long opinion. I also made clear, Senator Feinstein, at the end of the opinion, I am a native of this area. I'm a native of an urban, suburban area where I grew up in a city plagued by gun violence and gang violence and drug violence. So I fully understand, as I explained in the opinion, the importance of this issue. I specifically referenced that Police Chief Kathy Lanier's goals of reducing gang and gun violence was something I certainly applauded, but that I had to follow the precedent of the Supreme Court in that case. And as I read it, that's what it said. I'm sorry.
How do you reconcile what you've just said with the hundreds of school shootings using assault weapons that have taken place in recent history? How do you reconcile that?
Right. Senator, of course, the violence in the schools is something we all detest and want to do something about. And there are lots of efforts, I know, underway to make schools safer. I know at my girls' school, they do a lot of things now that are different than they did just a few years ago in terms of trying to harden the school and make it safer for everyone. Handguns and semi-automatic rifles are weapons used for hunting and self-defense, but as you say, Senator, you rightly say, they're used in a lot of violent crime and cause a lot of deaths. Handguns are used in lots of crimes that result in death, and so are semi-automatic rifles. That's what makes this issue difficult. As I said in the last 2 pages of my dissent in Heller, I fully understand the gang violence, gun violence, drug violence that has plagued various cities, including Washington, D.C. This was known as the murder capital of the world for a while, this city, and that was a lot of handgun violence at the time. And so I understand the issue, but as a judge, my job, as I saw it, was to follow the Second Amendment opinion of the Supreme Court, whether I agreed with it or disagreed with it. At the end of the opinion, I cited Justice Kennedy's Texas versus Johnson quote, which I read yesterday as the guiding light for the lower court judges and all judges.
Let me give you a couple of other quotes because I'm going to change the subject. Do you agree with Justice O'Connor that a woman's right to control her reproductive life impacts her ability to quote, participate equally in the economic and social life of the nation, end quote?
Well, as a general proposition, I understand the importance of the precedent set forth in Roe v. Wade. So Roe v. Wade held, of course, and it's reaffirmed in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that a woman has a constitutional right to obtain an abortion before viability, subject to reasonable regulation by the state, up to the point where that regulation constitutes an undue burden on the woman's right to obtain an abortion. And one of the reasons for that holding, as explained by the court in Roe and also in Planned Parenthood versus Casey more fully, is along the lines of what you said, Senator Feinstein, about the quote from Justice O'Connor. So that's one of the rationales that undergirds Roe v. Wade. It's one of the rationales that undergirds Planned Parenthood versus Casey.
Well, let me give you another one rationale. In the 1950s and 60s, the 2 decades before Roe, deaths from illegal abortions in this country ran between 200,000 and 1.2 million. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute. So a lot of women died in that period. So the question comes, and you have said today, not today, but it's been reported that you have said that Roe is now settled law. The first question I have of you is, what do you mean by settled law? I tried to ask earlier, do you believe it is